dominant win. And this series is now 2-1.
What were you most proud of about the way your team responded?
I was super happy about the physicality that we brought and the energy that we brought. Because being down 2-0, man, it's all about bringing energy, and we brought high energy.
A standing ovation. This was some display of great team basketball.
Sir, only one, but it's a great way of bouncing back, and now let's get ready for Game 4. It's gonna be a big one.
Try to win the next one. All the chants about Wolves in 6, Wolves in 7, we still down 2-1, so we gotta be ready to win the next game.
Anthony Edwards finished with 30 points. Julius Randle scored 24.
You see, when we bring the fight to them, when we address it, you see how they react to it.
That's the perfect response. Right from the start all the way through. Really great job. PJ way to come in here and give it a really good job. Only 10 turnovers. Okay, they had 15, we had 10. Yeah, it's the first time that that's happened to them since March.
It's one game, man. Exactly. To play again next game. Wolves on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Jared Greenberg is our eyes and ears on the ground for the Western Conference Finals, and with us from Target Center tonight. Jared, from the Thunder's perspective, what were the most important lessons to be learned from the most lopsided loss in franchise postseason history?
You know, Matt, I think it's easy to forget just how young this team is. In fact, the youngest roster in the NBA, the youngest team to accomplish what they have accomplished over the last 2 years. They're still learning. And Mark Daigneault, while he certainly was not happy that they lost or how they lost, he's spinning it in saying that we have to sometimes taste our own blood. Now, I confirmed he said he is not a vampire, but he does indeed believe that this can be a lesson they learned from. They didn't feel like there was any need to overreact. We tried to pester the Thunder over the last 48 hours about scheme, about tactics. They talked about a lack of aggression, and you mentioned it, the physicality. Mark Daigneault told us coming into Game 3, he knew that the Timberwolves were going to throw a haymaker. It would be how they responded, and ultimately the Thunder never got up off the mat 2 nights ago.
You know, I can confirm I've spoken to Mark Daigneault during daytime hours, although now that it occurs to me, never in the daylight, never under the sun, so there could be something to investigate.
Yes.
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander hasn't taken fewer shots or scored less in a playoff game than he did in Game 3 since the 2020 playoff bubble. Some of that, of course, is the minutes played. There was no reason for him to be on the floor late. But for someone known for his efficiency as a scorer, how would OKC like him to approach tonight?
Yeah, and remember, too, the free throw line was staggering, how frequently he got there in the first 2 games and how the Timberwolves defended without fouling in Game 3. I think they don't want anything to change with his approach. They're not going to ask him to go out and take 30 shots. They certainly would like to see more than the 13, but as you mentioned, a lot of that probably had to do with his limited amount of playing time the other night because they waved the white flag relatively early in the game. I think Minnesota's defense had a lot to do with it. You just saw how aggressive they were in Game 3. They went strictly to that man-to-man defense rather than playing a zone, which we saw sprinkled in Games 1 and 2. I think you're going to see SGA try and force the hand of the referees once again tonight. And as you would imagine, we have a fantastic referee crew here with a lot of seniority calling tonight's game. So I think that'll be a storyline as it was in Games 1 and 2.
All right, for the home team, there was a Cheesecake Factory-sized menu of positives for Minnesota in Game 3. Among them, the low turnover rate, which has been a problem in Games 1 and 2. How much of an emphasis is keeping that number down moving forward?
It's huge. It's absolutely right up there with the physicality and the intensity in terms of the priority list for Chris Finch. And when I speak to people around the organization, they talk about fast decision making. They talk about pace. And as Chris Finch just told me a couple of moments ago, it's not just about A to B pace in transition. It's also about half court pace, making sure they don't get in those grenade scenarios. Someone else in the organization told me late in the shot clock where OK's defense could be so suffocating. Guys, we often associate pace with justifying turnovers. We've talked about it with the Warriors for so many years. We excuse the turnover numbers because of how they're getting up and down the court and putting up so many more shots. It's the inverse for this Minnesota team. You look at the numbers throughout the course of this season, the more shots they take, the faster pace they play, the fewer turnovers they have. coaches with the Timberwolves tell me that oftentimes it's because they think too much when they slow down. You look at this series, they committed 19 turnovers and 14 turnovers in games 1 and 2 respectively. That's when they took their fewer number of shots. They put up 96 shot attempts in the Game 3 blowout win, and they only had 10 turnovers. So I would say one key to look at tonight, not just with the turnovers, but it's getting up at least 90 shots. That pace has to be up there for Minnesota to have a chance to even up this series tonight.
Quicker shots, those fast break opportunities are often more efficient, and safer shots for Minnesota or any other team. Jared Greenberg, who also is not a vampire, with us from Minneapolis. Appreciate the information. We'll talk to you soon. I have seen Jared in the light of day.
I've seen him in the daytime.
I've seen him in the daytime. I think we're safe there. Going back more than 40 years, Game 3 was the third largest margin of victory in a conference finals game since 1984. The other 4 big winners on the list advanced to the NBA Finals. So, GA, what can Minnesota replicate from Game 3 to win this series and get themselves to their first NBA Finals?
Well, I thought 2 things. One, I thought the force offensively that allowed them to own the paint. I think when the basketball gets in the paint, the offense dictates the possession. And then defensively, I thought their physicality. I thought they really set the tone. They were into the teeth of OKC. They were active. They were about a half step quicker in this game, and they did a great job of turning those deflections and steals into transition opportunities. And I think it's going to be critical for them. They won the point of attack. They did a really good job of not allowing rhythm to be displayed offensively from OKC. They made them uncomfortable, and that is going to be so critical. And we talked about the points in the paint. It's not just points in the paint, it's paint touches. And your ability, see how they get them extended? If that ball gets in the paint, you're going to typically be able to create great opportunities for your teammates. That was a beautiful attack, but just in general, when the ball goes to the paint, you create little mini transition opportunities, 2-on-1s, 3-on-2s, and then if you make the right reads, you're going to be able to have some success offensively. And we saw that time and time again in Game 3. Mm-hmm. We didn't see it in Games 1 and 2. That's got to replicate itself. Again, I don't think they shoot it the way they shot it.
Right.
But they can still play the way they played in Game 3.
Anthony Edwards had an easy 30 points in Game 3. Some of that may be a little bit of a carryover from Game 2 when he was a little more aggressive and a little more efficient. What happens tonight with him?
I think he's got to do the same thing. And you said Game 2, Game 3, very similar with his aggressiveness, a little bit different from Game 1. As when you go from series to series, you're seeing the same team over and over. You know, you kind of get lulled into the defenses and how they're trying to play you, you know, and kind of seeing OKC for the first time in Game 1 a little bit different than what you had just seen in the last series. So now he toned it in, he reeled it in Game 2, started being more aggressive, carried that over Game 3. And so now, I mean, you can't go back. You know, you can't turn that off.
I don't know if you caught that number or not, but Anthony Edwards is the all-time playoff leading scorer in Game 4s in NBA history. 34.5 a game on 50% shooting, 52% from 3 as well. I don't know if that means anything or not, but the 7 games now, it's kind of a thing.
Well, he's definitely, I think one thing I've admired about this young man's game is you can tell he's a student. You know, he treats a 7-game series kind of like a championship fight. Like, he gets a feel the first couple games of how you're going to play him and where he's going to be able to attack for himself, but also create for his teammates. And you can just get a sense he's getting the rhythm of how OKC plays. I'm interested to see if OKC does some things differently tonight to try to disrupt his rhythm.
Julius Randle, a game-high plus 38 in Game 3 after sitting out critical minutes, Wes, in Game 2, late in that game. What does he need to do moving forward in this series to get Minnesota where they want to be?
Just stay poised. You know, he doesn't have to do anything too crazy. Obviously, he has to play better. He has to be more consistent inside. But getting inside, attacking mismatches, he is one of the mismatches for OKC and Minnesota, in my opinion, with, you know, his size, his quickness, his ability to get into the paint and cause double teams. You want to be able to put 2 on the ball without having to create 2 people on the ball. So he can do that in matchups between defensive rebounding, pushing, and transition. His offensive glass, you know, that's a way that he can dominate and add another presence to this Minnesota team.
At 24 in Game 3 without a single turnover. That's huge for Minnesota. More coming up here On Playoff Central Live, as we shift east, Big Cat roared, and the Knicks came back on the road to get back into their conference finals. What it means moving forward next.